in the Haitian community. And in the past month and a half or so, that's happened in the past month and a half, which is so reminiscent of our history of forced removal. And we also plan to organize an in-person action together in the coming weeks. Before that, we helped to lead an effort with Sudo for Solidarity to collect 300 letters of support from the Japanese American community for HR 40 to establish a commission for reparations for African Americans. Just last month, we celebrated the New York City Fred T. Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution with a virtual program on the history of anti-Asian violence, policing, and what solidarity could look like with the Black community in this fight. This past summer, we organized protests at the Berks Family Detention Center and in front of Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf's house to demand the closing of family detention centers, and we continue to be active in the Shutdown Berks Coalition along with Sudo for Solidarity. And last June, we joined Sudo for Solidarity for a weekend of action, including a memorial and protest outside of Elmhurst Hospital to mourn the impact of COVID-19 and the violence on immigrants, incarcerated folks, and other communities of color. Oh, Stan, you're muted.
Today we gather to commemorate the anniversary of the February 19th, 1942 signing by President Franklin D. Roosevelt of Executive Order 9066, which allowed military authorities to exclude anyone from anywhere without trial or hearings, and led to the largest mass incarceration of a targeted ethnic group of citizens in American history. This order set the stage for the entire forced removal and incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants. Today, we gather to remember our history and our community and continue to practice our solidarity with others currently facing incarceration, violence, and deportation by our very own government. Today, we also remember those we have lost due to the ongoing and devastating pandemic that has ravaged our community this past year. My parents, their parents, and my parents' brothers and sisters were among those incarcerated at a camp called Poston in the Arizona desert. Survivors, descendants of survivors, and community members are here to mark this shameful episode in US history, which decades later led to an apology by the government and reparations. We also honor those who served in the armed forces, many volunteering, most serving while their families were being held in confinement. A substantial group of young men also resisted the military draft while being incarcerated, stating that they would gladly serve when all are released from the camps. This chapter of American history has always been relevant to the understanding of our country as a democracy and how the ideals of democracy can fail under political and public pressure. It is a horrible example of what happens when fear takes over and government singles out a racial or ethnic group for discrimination in order to counter the fear. The mission of the Day of Remembrance is to keep the memories of the incarceration alive and to prevent such actions from occurring again. We strive to never forget this history and present this program from our community.
So for our program today, we're going to hear from our partners at Families for Freedom, Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees, and Haitian Bridge Alliance. And we'll also have a community remembrance for those that we've lost, along with our annual candlelight ceremony. The panel discussion with organizers on the ground who deal directly with deportation and incarceration will talk about the continuation of policies toward immigrant communities today. And you'll also hear about future work planned by the Day of Remembrance Committee. And don't forget to stay for the raffle, which is an opportunity for us to gather in small groups to connect, reminiscent of us gathering together for our community potluck. So without further ado, I will pass along to Lauren, who will lead us in a land acknowledgement.
Thank you so much, Stan and Becca, for opening and welcoming us today. My name is Lauren, and I'm a member of the New York Day of Remembrance Committee and Yonsei descendant, a family incarcerated at Rower and Tule Lake during World War II. We recognize that this history of our community's incarceration is just one chapter in this country's history of displacing and harming communities, starting with the forced displacement of Indigenous communities that this country was founded upon. And so we begin with a land acknowledgement. We also invite you to visit native-land.ca to find out more about the histories and peoples of the land you are on. You can see the link in the chat. This land acknowledgement is adapted from one created by American Indian Community House, as well as one created by Dr. Harukuti Sharif Williams. We acknowledge that we are gathered today on the stolen, unceded, and forcibly occupied land of Indigenous, Native American, and First Nation people. And for our New York City community, we honor and express our deep respect and gratitude to the Lenape, Rockaway, Canarsie, and other Indigenous nations. We acknowledge the systematic erasure of the Lenape and many other nations, and recognize those still among us today. We acknowledge the peoples of these nations, their cultures, communities, their elders, from the past, present, and future generations. We acknowledge their histories, stories, and experiences, and we offer deep gratitude to the land and waters on which we stand. We also acknowledge and honor the lives of more than 20,000 free and enslaved Africans who were buried in the 1600s and 1700s on the 6.6 acres of land known as the African Burial Ground in what we now call Lower Manhattan. We acknowledge the more than 260 people in Seneca Village, founded by free and formerly enslaved African people on land located between 82nd and 89th Streets and 7th and 8th Avenues, who lived there until the government evicted them to build Central Park in the mid-1800s. We honor the lives of all who have struggled and continue to struggle against settler colonial oppression and white supremacy. We commit to working to understand and dismantle these systems in their many forms. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everybody. I'm Surya Yi, a member of the Day of Remembrance Committee. I'm a Yonsei descendant of the Hori family incarcerated at Manzanar, California, and the Katayama family incarcerated in Jerome, Arkansas. Excuse me. I welcome you all to this virtual program and thank you for being here. It's actually pretty amazing to see all these names and think about all of your faces. Here we are once again, gathered to remember, heal, learn, and pay tribute as we've gathered for over 40 years. And it's kind of a sad reality that we have to gather this way due to the pandemic and in a way break our tradition. And we didn't want to just pass over that loss of being together, our hugs, our tears, the warm smiles of our old friends, and of course, our community potluck. But this is a resilient community, a mighty one, one that I'm proud to have been raised in, and I know we will all be together soon. And you know, we're New Yorkers, and the ties that bind us are solid and true. So we did have many losses this year in our community, and we wanted to take a moment to remember some of them and just note that everyone we're speaking about today inspired us in their own way toward visibility, justice, leadership, and determination. Really fortunate to be joined by two of our committee co-founders. And before I bring them on, I just wanted to, had to say something about Corky Lee, who was very old friend of my family. And he met my mom in a anti-Vietnam War march in 69 or 70, met my dad a few years later trading comics in Hoboken. And he was everywhere with his camera at every event, at my sister's wedding, and always at our annual program.
And there's a camaraderie that I think develops between an annual program that's gone on for 40 years and Corky, who just always came consistently. We often would sit on the floor at the church in front of the pews and kind of gossip and like shoot the breeze during the program. And he would always say, give me a couple seconds to take some photos before you cut the lights. So we just miss him and are so grateful. And he made sure that we were seen. He took photos of every candle lighting service, and you can, for some of us, you can like chart our growth, our aging through those photos. Corky was a very special and remarkable individual whose decades-long persistence is worthy of honor and remembrance. Corky, we miss you so much. So now I'm really pleased to invite Leslie Inaba Wong and Julie Azuma to speak about other friends in the community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie Inaba Wong, and along with Julie Azuma, we co-chaired the New York Day of Remembrance in the 1980s through the 1990s. Today, we remember and honor those who are with us at the beginning of our journey and who we've recently lost. Lillian Kimura was a trailblazer. She rose in the ranks of the YWCA to become part of its national leadership. She was past president of the New York chapter of the JCL and went on to break barriers by becoming the first woman president of the national JCL. She was truly an unwavering supporter of our DOR programs and spent her life dedicated to fighting for social justice. Nanako Ogura was part of the early redress reparation movement, and her warm and generous presence was a constant at our New York DOR programs. Dr. Sumiko Ide and her husband Sam were at the initial New York Redress Reparations community meeting where we discussed and planned the New York public hearing of the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, which was held at the Roosevelt Hotel in November of 1981. Dr. Koide continued to support the struggle for redress and went on to become president of the New York chapter of the JCL, a position which he held for many years. Tadashi Tsufura passionately and honestly fought for redress, while at the same time pursuing a stellar career in education as a first Japanese American principal in the New York City schools. He gave a most powerful personal testimony at the New York CWIRIC hearing, taking great courage in telling his story. Corky Lee made it his personal mission to document everything that happened in the Asian American community, especially when he felt there was an injustice. Corky was present at every redress reparation event. He attended the hearing at the Roosevelt Hotel and photographed the testimonies. He was integral to every Asian event in the city, using his camera not only to capture our events, but also to immortalize our community. These people whom we have lost were part of the foundation of our Day of Remembrance program. that began in 1979 and continues through today. Their efforts were essential in knitting together our sometimes seemingly elusive New York Nikkei community, and due in large part to their dedication, we come together for one day every year to honor and commemorate, to share and learn, and to renew our commitment to social justice. Julie?
Hi, I'm Julia Zuma. It's my privilege to honor the 3 stellar women we lost this year. Each of them made an enormous difference to our national community. Irene Hirano Inoue was a visionary. She led the creation of the Japanese American National Museum and went on to serve as president of the museum for 2 decades. In 2000, with her husband, Daniel Inoue, the senator, Irene created the U.S.-Japan Council and was a much-needed bridge between Japanese and Japanese Americans. Irene created a national network of professionals and distinguished Japanese Americans. She also was able to forge a way to bring new emerging leaders to the Japanese American community. Ruby Takanishi was a senior research fellow at New America. She was also the former president and CEO at the Foundation for Child Development. She was an author. She was instrumental in raising the level of education for students from early childhood to adolescence. She researched for both not-for-profit and for branches of the federal government. Ruby touched the lives of many, many children and was a mentor to her many students. Juno Mura was chief of research at Timeline Books in the 1960s. She returned to become chief of reporters at the Reincarnated Life magazine in 1978. After retirement, she attended FIT to get a Master's of Fine Arts, and she was an active member of the Japanese American United Church. As a community, we mourn our collective loss. We're so grateful for each of their dedicated contributions to our ongoing movement for equality and justice. Surya.
Thank you both. So we're now going to share a tribute to those we spoke about today. A slideshow begins with many photos from Corky of our programs, and you'll hear a shakuhachi piece created by Corky's longtime friend, Perry Young. It's called An Offering for Corky. Thank you so much, Perry, for your generosity and spirit. And also thank you to April Gore and Daniel Inoue for your help with the slideshow. Let me just pull that up. So we're now going to transition to our candlelighting ceremony. And given this format, we wanted to invite folks to hold up a photo or a name when the camp names are read by Mike Ishii. But we wanted to give you a few minutes if you wanted to go collect something. So we'll give you a minute and we'll start in just a moment. Thank you.
Well, I have the honor to lead this ceremony today, and I'm very emotional after that very moving tribute. This is the part of our program where we annually hold space and we honor the lives and the struggle and the healing. And we remember all of those in our community who were forcibly removed and incarcerated during World War II. We've also come to understand in the past 40 years as we do this ceremony that as we have expanded our understanding and awareness of this ceremony, that actually this ceremony belongs to all people, not just us. And so today we will hold space for as many people as we can, certainly our allies who are here with us today, but we also invite you as you think about who you want to remember everyone that you need to. What I will do is I will there are 4 different areas of remembrance, and I will read some of the names of the locations where people have been mass incarcerated, subjected to state violence. At times, I will also invite you to say names of either those locations or individuals. And particularly at the very end, we'll have a moment where anybody who wants to say the name of someone that you want to remember today, or hold up a photograph, or maybe the name of that person or where they were incarcerated, you are very welcome to do that. And I'll make sure you know that you're invited at that moment. And then we will have a minute of silence. So first, I would like to start by naming the 10 World War II Japanese American War Relocation Authority camps. Gila River, Grenada, Heart Mountain, Jerome, Manzanar, Minidoka, Poston, Tule Lake, Rower, At this time, I want to also acknowledge that in addition to the 125,000 people in the United States that were incarcerated from our community, that in Canada, there were over 40 concentration camps and over 24,000 Japanese Canadians or immigrants were incarcerated in forced labor in those camps. And if there is anyone here today whose family is connected to that history, I welcome you now to say the name of those camps or your family members. And you may have to unmute.
The Gucci family in Bay Farm, Canada. I want to note that my mother's aunt's uncle passed away after being incarcerated before the family was relocated to Bay Farm. He should not have been moved, but because of the circumstances, he was forced to, and he died wherever it is that they were before they were taken to Bay Farm, leaving my mother's aunt with 3 teenagers.
Thank you, Sumiko.
Right.
Anyone else from the Canadian experience?
So here you go.
Okay, I will then move to other camps. By this, we mean people who were incarcerated during World War II in Department of Justice, INS-run camps, military bases such as Fort Sill or Crystal City. If there's anybody who would like to acknowledge the camps that their families were located in, please do so now.
Yes, my name is Tak Furumoto. I was born in Turtle Lake segregation camp, October 20th, 1944. Our family, my parents, and my four older sisters were interned there.
Thank you, Tak.
My grandmother's father was in a Department of Justice camp in Azuma, Montana.
I'd now like to take the opportunity to welcome anyone here who has relations who have been incarcerated or are currently incarcerated in detention sites. As we hold space for these currently incarcerated people or recently incarcerated people, I will note that in 2019, over 500,000 immigrants were mass incarcerated in over 200 detention sites in the United States. That's an average of over 50,000 people daily in detention at a cost of $3.2 billion annually. And this is still going on in the United States. Japanese Americans were involved in fighting detention in this past year at the family detention sites at Dilley, Carnes, and Berks. And they were also involved in fighting detention at the Northwest Detention Center, at the Yuba County Jail, and at Adelanto. Finally, I'd like to hold space here for anyone who has come here today as an ally. During World War II, when our community was forcibly removed, there were virtually no allies who came to stand with us. Nobody came to the fences in the concentration camps. There were very few and greatly cherished people who did show up for us, such as Bayard Rustin, the famous civil rights leader who stood up for Japanese Americans, Quaker leaders, for instance. But this is partly why we are showing up today, because we need to be the allies that our community needed during World War II. So at this time, if you're here as an ally, we welcome you to identify yourself. Either raise your hand or feel free to say your name.
I'd like to just to recognize the Masuda family in Lake Tule. They were friends.
Thank you, Liz.
Stanley Mark from Aldef. I don't recall which camps these people were in, but they had a great influence on me. And I used to see them at different day of remembrance programs. Kazuo Jima, Min Matsuda, and Taxi Kuzunoki. Taxi was the editor of the New York Nichibei English version, and many years our office, many people in our community, along with Corky, we worked together.
Thank you, Stan. For remembering. So at this time in the program, what we'd like to do is just give everyone a chance who would like to say the name or names of people that you want to honor and remember today. This is for any people connected to mass incarceration, detention, and imprisonment. We hold space for all communities here today. So now is the time to go ahead and say those names, and I welcome you to hold up signs, pictures, candles, suru, and also speak their names if you would like. And I encourage you to scroll through the screens so that we can see each other while we do so.
I'll make mention of Franz Gedinez, a member of Family Sufilum who passed on earlier last year.
Kei Uchiyama, who is a resident of New York City and was deported during World War II back to Japan, and urged my father to come to this country despite everything.
Okay.
And the reason I'm here.
I'd like to honor my father and mother, George and Mary Ishizuka. And pictured here are my mother and her family, her 6 siblings and her parents. This is the Nishi family of West LA.
Go ahead.
Please feel free to speak.
Hello. I'd like to honor, you've already honored my father, Tadashi Tsufura, but I would like to honor my grandparents.
Picture?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I'd like to honor the rest of the family that was incarcerated in Gila River Canal, which are my grandparents and my uncles, in addition to my father, the entire family who you see here prior to being put in camp. It is in their memory also that we honor today in remembrance. So thank you for remembering our entire family.
No, Amyが欲しいってあげちゃったの。
Asagawa-san, would you like to?
Hi, I'd like to honor my family. We as a family owned a restaurant in Little Tokyo, and we first went to Heart Mountain, and my father decided to go back to Japan, so we were moved to Tula Lake. And these are my parents, Sahichi and Hatsu Hasegawa.
And the 3 are the children.
And the 3, all of my brother and sister and myself were all interned at that time. At the last moment after the war, we decided to come back to Chicago, because my uncle had a job at the Stevens Hotel in Chicago. And he says, don't go back to Japan. So we moved, thank goodness, to Chicago, where my father found a abandoned house, because housing was so tight in Chicago, because thousands of people had migrated to Chicago for wartime jobs. And he fixed it up. And the first thing he put in was hot water, because, you know, Japanese people love to take baths. And so we lived there for 25 years. And I now live in Long Island, New York.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. I'd also like to welcome you if you would prefer to share the names of people you would like to remember in the chat. And please feel free to do that for the remainder of our time together today.
Could you unmute me, Mike? Yeah. This is my mother, Mary Hamanaka. She was in Jerome. This is my father, Conrad. He was in Jerome too. That's where they actually met. I would like to honor them today.
Thank you.
I wanted to, this is Teddy Yoshikami. I wanted to honor my parents. We were all in Tule Lake and then relocated to Amachi, Granada. But then after that, I wanted to also honor, we went to Seabrook, New Jersey, and there were so many people there I wanted to honor. There are too many names for me to list them now, but the whole village basically were from camps. And many of them are gone now.
Hi, I'm Jill Cornell, and I would like to honor the Takahashi family. That's my mother there on the right, and her sister Tamayo on the left. And I actually have a picture of my grandparents. I don't know if you can see it, but my grandmother was in camp, and her name was Tsuya, and Itaro had died before they went to camp, and she had about 9 kids with her, if I'm not mistaken. A couple were out of the camp working or in the army, but they took up 4 barracks at Topaz, Utah, in Delta, Utah. I also would like to acknowledge the Shimada family, who were great friends of ours.
So I'm going to encourage people to keep posting in the chat if you would like to remember people during the program. Let's go ahead and have a moment of silence while we hold space and remember all those that we wish to honor today. Thank you, everybody. I'm now going to pass over the program to Carl Takei.
Thank you, Mike. So for those who don't know me, I'm Carl Takei. I'm one of the members of the New York Day of Remembrance Committee. And I'm also one of the co-chairs of Sudo for Solidarity and work for the ACLU as a staff attorney. I'm a Yonsei descendant of incarcerees at Tule Lake, Amachi, and the Bismarck, North Dakota DOJ camp. And I'm honored to introduce our panel for today. There are 3 members of our panel. 2 of them are with us right now, and the third will hopefully be able to join. She's dealing with some emergencies that unfortunately intervened today. But first, Donald Anthonyson is the Director of Families for Freedom. Since joining Families for Freedom in 2004, Donald has served as a lead organizer, former board member, and has led the efforts of the International Deportee Justice Campaign. He also produced a monthly radio show, The War on Immigrants Report, that aired on WBAI. Donald migrated to the US in 1979 from Antigua and has been involved in a range of social issues, ranging from police brutality to anti-racial responses to immigration. Ninaj Raoul is a co-founder and community organizer at Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees in New York, which was founded in 1992 to respond to the human needs of Haitian refugees and immigrants in the United States fleeing persecution. Through education, community organizing, leadership development, and collective action, HWHR members empower themselves as they struggle for social and economic justice. And the organization conducts leadership and organizing trainings for adult literacy learners, where Haitian women make global connections to local realities. And we hope to be joined soon by our third panelist, Gerline Joseph, who is the president of Haitian Bridge Alliance, which assists thousands of Haitian refugees who spent a dangerous journey from Brazil to California, crossing multiple countries and borders in search of a better life. The Haitian Bridge Alliance's mission is to guide, elevate, and empower Haitian immigrants through advocacy, organizing, outreach, direct services, and it's to help Haitian immigrants and refugees integrate into American society while maintaining their cultural heritage as they continue to navigate the complexities of the US immigration system. And Gerline was actually on the border yesterday as observing some of the changes as people began to be admitted for the first time through ports of entry there. We are in a moment of transition from a presidential administration that was explicitly racist and extraordinarily brutal, using the immigration system as a weapon in support of white supremacy. And we're now under a different administration, but it's a time where complacency is a real danger. So I want to just start by asking you, Donald and Ninaj, to describe what Black immigrants were subjected to during the Trump administration so that we can understand the institutions, the personnel that are now transitioning over to this new Biden administration.
I'm going to be, I'll let Ninaj go forward till I gather my thoughts, if that's okay with you, Ninaj.
That's fine. Thank you, Donald. First, I just want to greet everyone and thank you for inviting us to be part of your program. During the Trump administration, they basically continued the detention practices where people, in the case of Haitian migrants that entered the US, they were detained at the border and given orders of removal upon entering. Prior to this, in the Obama administration, we started seeing a surge of Haitian refugees in exactly 5 years, exactly to date, 5 years ago. We started seeing our first Haitian refugees that were coming through the southern border that had traveled all the way from South and Central America, but mostly Brazil, but other countries as well, coming through 9 or 10 countries at most to get here. And initially in 2016, they were entering with humanitarian parole, but towards the end of 2016, which was also the end of the Obama administration, we started seeing a huge spike in deportations, much like what we're seeing this month with Haitian that came in over the border. I guess it was because they needed to have less Black immigrants coming into the country, and there were just too many Haitians at the border.
and it was right before an election. We're talking, this was in September of 2016, September 22nd to be exact. There was a sudden decision on the part of the Obama administration to, starting the next day, any Haitian that comes to any border should be automatically detained with the order of deportation. And they just started deporting people in really large numbers. And when I say large numbers, it went from 50 people a month to over 1,000 people a month. There were 2 flights of 135 per week. And I really believe that it was just simply because it was going to look bad for Hillary Clinton in the election, in the upcoming election, to have all these Black immigrants coming in. Well, at the time they thought she was going to win the election, and as we know, she didn't. And we advocated to stop these deportations. Not even 2 weeks later, there was a major disaster in Haiti, Hurricane Matthew, that wiped out a lot of the crop. And they stopped it for a few weeks, sort of like what's going on now, what Biden had said they were going to do. And they started it again by the end of October, just before the election. And as we know, Trump won the election. And when the Trump administration came in January, it was basically the same. The deportations continued, but what the difference that we noticed was that there was more people being detained for a more extensive period of time. And the Trump administration had a very business approach to everything. It was all about the dollar and the profit. And there were many companies that were allowed access. First of all, you have this prison industrial complex that we're dealing with, where there's money being made, whether it's for counties or whether it's the private businesses like the big CSA that has many detentions all over the country. But we started seeing a pattern of more access by the predatory sort of loan folks that had total access to the Haitians inside the detention and would present themselves as, giving humanitarian aid, and would give them these, they were released basically with these ankle bracelets on, what we call e-carceration, that Donald often refers to as electronic shackles, because that's essentially what they are. And
yeah, Ninaj, for those who don't understand, ankle bracelets is such an anodyne term for what these things are. Can you explain?
Certainly. So these are electronic ankle monitors. There's a program that ICE has where I think it's called ASAP, Accelerated, what is it? Surveillance program, where when people are released from detention, they're forced to wear these bracelets, these electronic monitors. They're these really thick monitors that are around the ankle. They can't be removed. You have to shower with it. You have to have it all day on. You have to sit next to an outlet to recharge it a couple of days. And when they misfunction, you get frequent harassing calls from ICE, making you feel like you've been tampering with them, even if you haven't. And so they're very dehumanizing, and they're reminiscent of shackles, basically, because that's what they are, of slavery. So it's like you're going from incarceration to e-carceration. So you're not really being released. You're coming out of the physical building, but you're still wearing this and being surveilled. And sometimes you're called a couple times a week and told not to leave your home. There are some that are connected to these private predatory companies where they have to pay $420 per month the whole time that they're wearing it, till about 70 or 80% of the thousands of dollar bond is paid off. And so many people are still wearing this. Initially in 2016, in New York, we started seeing people having them removed after about 60 days. And sometimes we would do some advocacy for it. But because of the pandemic, we have many people that have been wearing it way over a year and haven't been able to have them removed because they're not having physical check-ins as a result of the pandemic. So this is a pattern that we started to see more of during the Trump administration. We started seeing more people being released with more excessive bonds. Like I saw some Haitian people having their families pay between $15,000 and $25,000 to be released. And mind you, you're still facing deportation. You still have to go to the judge, and you could possibly still be deported. And we saw a lot of family separation. Of course, that started a lot under Obama at the end. As I said, at the very end of Obama, at the late 2016, is probably when I saw most family separation, when they were trying to get those large numbers out. And then that's going on again today. You know, so as bad as things were during the Trump administration, I know with the Haitian communities, and probably Donald will tell you with a lot of the Black immigrant communities, these are patterns that we've seen with all administrations in the past decades, whether it's a Republican president or a Democratic president in place.
Before I move on to Donald, Ninaj, can you just explain, you know, in the past year, like especially thinking about families who are detained, how many of those families are Haitian families?
I don't have an exact number, and maybe if Gerline was here, she would be able to provide an exact number. But I can tell you that most of the families that were detained were Haitian. And it's the first time that we've seen this, you know, in decades, where most of the people at the southern border. And so it was unusual in 2016 when I started seeing Haitians coming up. We've been working with Haitian refugees since for 29 years now. And I've heard of some of the Central Americans coming up at the southern border with the ankle bracelets, and years prior to that. But it was the first time that because of the situation with the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, 11 years ago, Brazil had offered sort of like, in disguise of humanitarian assistance, they offered for Haitians to come. These are survivors of the earthquake, to come to move to Brazil. But the fact is they needed the labor because they had the World Cup coming up in 2014. So they needed to build all these hotels to accommodate the guests coming from all over the world. They needed to build more stadiums. And then in 2016, they ended up getting the bid for the Summer Olympics. And so more tens of thousands of Haitians ended up in Brazil, for example. And as I said, there were still also other countries that had Haitians in between Brazil and the United States.
Donald, can you put, you know, sort of everything that Ninaj has described in the larger context of, you know, all of these companies, like the companies that own the GPS ankle monitors, the companies that are profiting from, you know, increased immigration detention, and the sort of institutions of just, you know, jails and prisons, how, you know, this sort of immigration detention and surveillance apparatus relates to the larger institutions of mass incarceration and anti-Blackness?
Well, I'm going to give it a shot, but first of all, I'll say definitely humbled to be invited back again, Families for Freedom. My personal level, this is about the second or third Day of Remembrance participating in. And I did hear some names, and, you know, I went out to Dili in 2000, double digits, I don't know, 13 or 12, when that detention, that camp was started. And I shared the stage with a survivor of the internment, Japanese internment. And it was real serious, similar to what Mike was saying. Her logic was that there's nobody in those barren places, it appears, supporting the Japanese Americans who were interned. And she came and gave massive, massive support. So I'm saying enough respect to that, and the solidarity that we speak of pseudo, and what we're here, me and Ninaj, is mighty important to tie into your question about the largest issue. Straight up, whether or not we accept it or not, immigration in America is based on basically white supremacy. And, you know, it may sound like a cliche nowadays, but that's just the reality of it. It's also based on exclusion too, and also expulsion when they can. So for instance, you speak of the Executive Order 1966. That was, they were about to, if possible, expel as much Japanese Americans that they could, you know, but then people got detained, people lost their businesses. No kind of reparation, I think, can replace the work that people put in California. Because after I got into this work, I found out a lot of things. Like I knew more. I only knew of, but I knew more. But to tie that into what is happening now is that when we say the immigration stuff is seriously a white supremacist, racist point of view, an elitist point of view, it has been like that all the way through. Afro immigrants are being detained and removed at a ratio that is skewed for the population that we occupy, the space we occupy here in America. So it seems like it's targeted. And America has a major issue with Haiti. I don't know what it is, but America has some, I know, inherent dislike or animosity towards Haiti and Haitians, you know, from the beginning of the revolution till now. You know, United States occupied Haiti in 1912 or whenever to 1934, did what they had to do. But coming back to the now moment, I was also in Mexico City at one point. I met a whole bunch of Haitians, which I was seriously surprised. Like, what were they doing there? And then found out, like the nudge, is that they made a trek coming all the way from Brazil, coming up. The reality is they are making money off of us. We in this movement for a while, and we've been noticing that detention centers just exploded. And the fact is that they also get a subsidy where they don't have to pay a certain amount of taxes because they qualify as real estate. So all the beds that they have are a tax deduction. We are made in commodities for these companies. And what Naj is saying about the shackles, it is an electronic shackles. I'm sure everybody know about that electronic fence where the dog runs up to the fence, but you can't pass the fence because of something. It's the same thing with these shackles. You got shackles that are GPS and tuned that if you go to, for instance, a state border, it will announce that you're leaving the master zone, which is, what is a master zone? And the language that is being used is also degraded. And we have people, women, who have not worn a skirt or a dress in public for years because of having a shackle on their foot and the stigma that goes with it. So it's a money-making thing, but it's also a racial issue. And it's very difficult right now. Right now, we speak of Haitians who are getting deported, but it's a concentrated effort by the ICE workers. That union, the leader of that union is a bona fide white supremacist. They are assuming a whole mass amount of power to do certain things. So even if Biden comes and say, moratorium, you have a judge blocking that, and you still have flights which we are monitoring that are due to go to Haiti, to Africa, that is loaded up with Afro immigrants. So it will appear to be a very dedicated push. And I know most of the people in here are American born, not necessarily getting caught up with the deportation proceedings and all those kind of things, but I do respect the solidarity and the alliance-ship because it is needed. It's not easy. We only hear about the Haitians when we speak about it, but it's every week. It's the same way that people have been locked up in these Tule Lake, out in Arizona, all over these places, and nobody knew anything about it. Hidden. And then all of a sudden, we get released. But it's a history of the United States. It's about making money first and foremost, if they can, but it's also exclusion, whether or not it's on the natural soil or exclusion from the opportunities to move forward and to build a life in America. I think you're on mute.
You're muted, Carl.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Donald. One thing that I want to emphasize is about, the way that a lot of these histories are parallel, like the years of occupation of Haiti from 1912 to 1934. That's the same time period when, my great-grandfather, who immigrated to the United States, was unable to become a US citizen because of racist immigration laws, and was, then put under surveillance by the FBI because, he was one of the community leaders that they had identified as dangerous in Seattle. And so, it's all of these same tools being deployed in slightly different ways. I want to turn back to something that Ninaj brought up about, how at the end of the Obama administration, that it was really the Black immigrants who were first on the chopping block, who, in order to, because of this fear-driven response from the Obama administration about what might happen if, there were too many Black immigrants coming to the United States. How are those kinds of dynamics influencing what the Biden administration does when there are all of these sort of right-wing reports about, the fears of a flood of immigrants if all of, if there's immigration reform, if there's, if there, like a restoration of asylum policies?
I mean, it's the same. I feel like February right now, in February 2021, is, from where I sit in my office in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and the activities that are going on with Haitian refugees, I feel like it took me straight back to October of 2016 of what's going on with the Obama administration. And we saw this also in at the very beginning of the Clinton administration. When Biden was running and going to Little Haiti, and he was going to be friends of Haitians and change everything. Clinton said the same thing in 1992. And in 1993, he went in doing worse than what Bush was doing before him. He was really influenced by people like Jesse Helms that pressured him and said that, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of Haitians showing up at our shore if you change this. And he went in worse than what they were doing before him. And during this month alone, during just the first 2 weeks of February, they deported 900 Haitians, and it continues. They've continued. So the number's gone up. The goal was to deport 1,800 Haitians, which is up higher than last month and the prior months, even when Trump was there. And I think what happens is we hear one thing and the actions are totally contrary to the values that the Biden administration claims to have. The same day that that the Biden administration earlier this month announced all these executive orders, one being that they are going to have a task force to reunite the families that were separated under the Trump administration. There was a plane going to Haiti full of Haitians. And we have members that we work with that were detained, prior detained, and one in particular who's a volunteer with us. She has an aunt that was deported 2 weeks ago with 4 children. She had just crossed the border. And the thing is, she thought that it was safe now that the Biden administration is here. And that's something that we have to really make our community members aware of. You know, this is the same cycle. You know, Carl, you mentioned the parallels between the Japanese community and the Haitian community during the occupation, 1915 and 1934. When I read about what FDR was doing with the Japanese community, FDR was up in Haiti physically, rewriting the Constitution, you know, during that occupation. He wasn't president then, it was under Truman, but so I'm learning a lot more about this and documenting just to lift this for our younger generations, especially because these are cycles. These are cycles. It just keeps happening and happening. And what we're seeing during this month is a perfect example of that, because they said that they're going to have this moratorium to stop. And as Donald mentioned, the judge blocked it. They said that they're going to reunite families that were divided, but meanwhile, they're separating families by putting part of them on a plane and sending them to Haiti. It's continuing, you know.
Donald, yeah, go ahead. You're muted.
You're muted, Donald.
Oh, okay. It says the host is not allowing. Somebody got the hand on the button there. But what you're saying, Ninaj, and also Carl, the questions you're asking, and also the folks, and especially the people who have survived some of these places, okay, is that the immigration concept is always about that divide and breaking apart. So it breaks apart families, yeah, but it also divides us, all of us who are suffering the same thing. Because, yeah, you go back to 1915, your parents was feeling some kind of pressure. The rhetoric then was against Asians. You know, previous century, it was the Chinese Exclusion Act. And when you see all the stuff that they had, all the cartoons and the characters, it's like they're going to overtake the country. It's a similar thing what Ninaj is saying. The right-wing folks are saying, oh, all these black immigrants are going to come in and raid, and take over the country. It is not so. It is devious, and it's because the system itself is truly built on exclusion and racism, is why all these things will continue to happen. Whether or not it's surveillance to your family or surveillance to a shackle, it's still the same thing. It is how would I say, a social control issue, a political repression issue. It's also a class issue too. So all of us will remain the other, regardless how long you've been here. If you're not coming up lily white, look, right now there's an issue of anti-Asian violence. And it's going back and forth and people trying to figure this stuff out. It's still the same divide and conquer issue. And the solidarity that we speak of is going to be mad important as we go forward. Because the Biden administration, Biden was vice president to the reporter in chief. They put a bill out 2 days ago that it sounds pretty, a lot of people, it's going to benefit quite a few people. But it's also going to continue family separation and surveillance at the borders, and until the issue of America is resolved, which is the acceptance of their roots and truly accepting it, then we can only move forward, because we'll keep having excuses, or we can't let all these people in. They have drug carriers, they're this, we have diseases. And this is what ICE and Trump is using at the border right now. So people are denied what should be offered, which is the asylum, the credible fear, based on some 1942 issue about health issues. So people are not even given a chance to defend their asylum claim. They just turn around, put on a bus, send back over to Mexico because of the COVID restrictions. And it's not going to change, but we just hope that ultimately, again, I go back to the solidarity because I have to say enough respect to the whole Japanese community that come out the day of Remembrance. It's not, we don't have too many of these, or should I say we don't have enough of these. And I do appreciate the time that we have here, but also seeking to continue to build that solidarity and allies, because it's important. It was a great one out at Berks too.
Yeah. So I want to move on to this question of moving forward. And, so I want to put the question to each of you. Instead of allowing things to get trapped in the same cycle that we've already seen multiple times, what should we be advocating for and organizing for? And what can Japanese Americans do to join in solidarity with your work?
I mean, at Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees, we're fighting on a lot of fronts, same as Families for Freedoms and Haitian Bridge Alliance. We're trying to protect those that have temporary status. We've been able to do that throughout the Trump administration through litigation work and organize around that litigation work so that people can stay in status so that they can fight, self-advocate for permanent solutions such as permanent residency. Not just for people with TPS, DACA, but for all immigrants that are undocumented, we believe should have permanent residency. We believe in permanent solutions. But I think what can the Japanese community do? I think I just want to reiterate what Donna was saying is that that your community has been powerful allies. Mike talked about early, when your ancestors were detained and you didn't have allies, And I just want to say a couple of words about the power of allies. I mean, when just last summer, for example, I'm going to go back a little further to when Families for Freedom started. We connected with them pretty much they were in being run out of an apartment in Crown Heights. And I started going to meetings there, literally this first year that they started. And they told us about Haitians that were detained in certain places and in New Jersey. And we started going to the detentions together because they were coming across. This was right after 9/11 when they were detaining a lot of, it was started by 2 South Asians, by the way, and they were detaining a lot of South Asians and Middle Eastern. And they started seeing a practice of Haitians being detained too. There was a claim that Ashcroft who had said that Middle Easterns were going through Haiti to come in. So they went ahead and said, let's detain Haitians too, anybody who comes from Haiti. And so, and just last summer, it was when I got a call from Mike Ishii from Solidarity. That's how I found out that they were Haitian. Most of the families in Berks were Haitian. I didn't know that. I had been to Berks before over the years, back in 2002, in the same period that I was working with Families for Freedom when they first started. But that's how I found out that it was there. And we participated in the actions together that Donna was just referring to. So I just want to say that the not only the power that allyship in these in supporting the current families that are being detained, but I think in the example of the Remembrance, because too often our communities of color are faced with erasure, where, they just, our history just disappears. And if we don't mark it and pass it on to the youth and let them know, to try to give them a chance to understand where this trauma that they're inheriting is coming from. So I think that alone has been a great example. And just in last week in organizing this Day of Remembrance, I want to say finally, we were participating in a meeting together, and they asked if we could get a directly impacted person to speak. And I was like, I don't think, I'm not comfortable asking anybody to come right next to immigration and speak. And as far as people with the ankle bracelets, like a half a block away from where they have to check in and so forth, when we were going to go to African burial ground. And the next morning I went to my office and there was a woman there who had an ankle bracelet. And And I had just received a survey for people with ankle bracelets, and I asked her if she wanted to take it. She was like, absolutely. And while I just got her set up on the computer, another guy called and he said he just went there, even though they don't have check-ins, to try to self-advocate to have it removed. He'd been wearing it for 14 months. And they were like, no, we don't have orders to take them out. And I told him about the survey. He was like, absolutely. When can I come? He needed to be able to use the computer. I said, come on Friday. We're having a protest in the morning, but come in the afternoon. As soon as I got off the phone, the woman was like, did I hear you say you're having a protest? Can I come? You know, can I participate? So, you know, if these things aren't happening, if we don't have, if we're not allies for each other, yeah, I just want to say, basically, it makes our movement more powerful. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Dinaj. Donald?
You're muted, Donald.
Oh, okay, there's some kind of fancy stuff here, so I got unmuted. The way forward is more often making sure we know where we came from or what the path that took us here. And for instance, me, I'd like to learn more from y'all, the ancestors, the people who are still alive. Like, we know the war ended that internment, but what else was going on? I know there were people who resisted, people who said, no, I'm not going to that camp, lock me up, whatever it is. Like, that is something to learn, and that is something, if it can be passed on, would be great. The way forward, again, for us, the demographic that we work with is unfortunately the lowest hanging fruit that there is when it comes to immigration. We're non-US citizens who have had interaction with the criminal justice system. None of the laws that are in play right now give us much movement. You as a lawyer know how that is. Clinton, yeah, that guy, he created some laws that made it. Basically, once we step on it, it's like those sticky traps that you catch the bugs on. You step on, you're not getting off. Not easily unless you're leaving something back there. We need to change, first and foremost, those aspects of any kind of immigration law that criminalizes migration. And the migrants who are here and the migrants who are coming in. That is going to take a lot. The American Japanese community carries some weight. You know, yeah, the community is stigmatized as the model immigrant or model. I know there was a stuff that people did minority. Like, yeah, model minority. I've met people who says, don't say that because it's going to be a fight. And I'm done with that. But the power that the communities have built up can be shared. So you have strong people in the higher ups in government. I think somebody mentioned the passing of Senator Inoue's wife or himself. So there is power on your side. There is power on our side, but again, the power on our side seems to be somewhat fearful of stepping up. And that would, Haitian bridge, we need to bridge with the African Americans. In particular, so the African Americans, for their struggle in this country is longer, except for the First Nation people who we give credit to. But we need to bridge those. We need to cross the bridge and link with them. Same way we link with the Asian. And we do work with Southeast Asian, the Cambodians, the Viets, Laotians, and build that solidarity so we can effect something, because we can't rely on the executive orders. It's an executive order that placed us here for this day of remembrance. Dinaj mentioned Roosevelt. One of his weirdest boasts was that he can run in one of them little countries is nothing. I was there writing the Constitution. The arrogance that an occupier is going to write a constitution for the people. And then that occupier comes back and be the president of this country and sign orders to lock people down, take them away from their family, remove them from the equity. So we need to build them kind of power so that don't happen, whether here or across the borders.
All right. Thank you both so much. I think this has been a great discussion, and I think it also helps point the way forward, that we can't just rely, as you said, Donald, on the executive orders, that we have to change the laws that criminalize migration and that allow all of these different administrations in a row to keep engaging in the same practices. And as you said, Ninaj, you know, targeting Black immigrants first. Thank you. Looking forward to continuing to work together. And I'm so appreciative. And I think if somebody from the committee can just put the links for Families for Freedom, Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees, and the Haitian Bridge Alliance in the chat, that would be great, since I think folks will be interested to find out more about each of these three organizations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Akpan, a Yonsei and NYDOR co-chair, who will be sharing some closing remarks with my comrade Lawrence Mida, who's also Yonsei and NYDOR co-chair, before we move on to the raffle. So thank you, everyone, for being a part of today's Day of Remembrance. I'm so honored to be in community with you all today. And also thank you, Ninaj and Donald, for such a powerful panel, and Carl for moderating. We missed Geraldine today, but we're grateful that Donald and Ninaj were able to join us and underscore the importance of centering Black immigrants in the fight for immigrant justice and the urgent need to stop deportations and hold the Biden administration accountable. I'm thinking about how today's panel clearly illustrated the ongoing injustices in this country, fueled by xenophobia, racism, and white supremacy, that the Japanese American community was also subjected to prior to and during World War II, which we're still healing from today. So thank you again. We're so grateful. As Stan and Becca introduced at the start of the program, the mission of New York Day of Remembrance is to honor the Japanese people who were incarcerated by keeping the memories of incarceration alive and to prevent such actions from occurring today. You know, before Japanese Americans were targeted and incarcerated, we saw how violent this country has been to Native Americans, Black people, and Asian folks, and people of color more generally. And we must explore the root of the violence that still occurs today and what that means for our path forward. We must be real about what it will truly take to stop repeating history. And that means breaking the cycle of harm within our communities by working to abolish oppressive carceral systems, the same systems that led to 125,000 Japanese Americans being incarcerated, that led to countless deaths of Black and brown people by police, and thousands of Black immigrants being detained over just this year. And in our fight to stop repeating history, we also must determine how we can repair history. How can we heal for our ancestors and our descendants?
When we think about repair, we call to mind the Japanese tradition of kintsugi, the practice of repairing a piece of pottery that has been broken. The pottery shards are rejoined using lacquer and gold dust, highlighting the fissures in the piece and its history of breakage. In this way, we see repair become transformative. It's not just returning something to its previous state. It's also acknowledging the harm that was experienced and factoring that into its future state. Japanese Americans have a strong foundation for repairing history. The redress movement showed us the importance of being able to share our stories and have our experiences acknowledged as a first step to meaningful repair. The redress movement also revealed the strength and organizing capacity that our community has to push for repair on a national level. I feel the strength of our community reflected in all of us gathered here today and in spirit. We must use our power to ensure that the US works to repair its past and ongoing harms. One of our pathways forward has been deepening community care and standing in solidarity with those impacted most directly by the US's racist systems and policies today. With that in mind, we wanted to share some of our next steps for our work ahead. Please share out and donate to the Black Immigrants Bail Fund, a national organization providing free assistance and relief to Black immigrants and working to end mass incarceration of Black immigrants. Learn more at Sudo for Solidarity's website about how you can get involved in the fight for reparations for Black Americans through HR 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. This legislation is a study commission, like the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians. We also want to uplift the Japanese Latin American Campaign for Justice. Please check out their work to learn more about their history of incarceration and forced deportations and their current call for justice. In honor of Day of Remembrance, the best-selling cartoonist and illustrator Adrian Tomine created a limited edition print of his grandmother right before she was incarcerated in 1942. This print is available for purchase at the following bit.ly link on the screen until tomorrow. The funds will go to support Sudo for Solidarity, so please check that out. And in March, New York Day of Remembrance members will be partnering with Chicago's Nikkei Uprising Group to start a Nikkei Abolition Study Group. If you're interested or just want some more information, you can reach out to us at dayofremembranceny@gmail.com. Today, I'm so grateful that we have been able to come together virtually to hold space for our grief, our histories, and the work ahead. As we shift to these next steps, we also want to create some space for joy and celebrating our community. So now we would like to move on to our raffle. Thank you, everybody.
All right. I have the pleasure of leading us through our raffle. I was looking, wow, we're only 15 minutes over time, which is sort of a record for us. Yeah. Thanks to everyone who's stayed with us for this raffle, which someone described as the cake at the end. You know, we're all missing the actual cake at the end, our potluck, but we wanted to try to do something kind of fun. We all love a raffle, and we were just really overwhelmed by donations we received from the community, organized mostly by Susan McCormick, who I hope is still here. She's just an incredible community member. So the way we're going to do this, we actually have a bunch of prizes, but we're going to bundle them, and we're going to spin the wheel for 10 winners. And then I'll reach out to you all, the winners, after to discuss the prize bundles. Some of the prizes are for local New York City restaurants and businesses. So they might not work for some of our folks remoting in from other places. Welcome to you all too. And so just really, really quickly, I just wanted to run through our prizes. We're also extremely grateful to Katie Yamasaki, author and artist, who donated signed copies of 4 of her books. I think Linda's going to put some of these links in the chat. Donald, you're not staying for the raffle? Okay, stay. Okay, so Katie, we'll put her link, her website in the chat. We also are donating red Sudo for Solidarity t-shirts, Project Bento postcards and post-its, Close the Camps poster, which we had last year, an annual membership to New York JCL. And we have several $50 gift cards to Wasan Brooklyn, Japanese restaurant in Brooklyn, Benton, which is a Japanese restaurant in Long Island City, Sunrise Mart, and Wuhao, New York, and they're going to donate a tenugui. So if you register, we're going to spin this wheel. Let me share, I have my screen. If you have questions, you can ask them in the chat. So here's this wheel. There's a lot of names. This is everyone who registered. But if it lands on someone who's not here, we're going to disqualify them. So if it lands on your name, please unmute yourself and let us know you're here. We're going to move along. And we collected this list of names at about 1:45. So if you registered after that, I don't know, say something. But here we go. Can everyone hear?
Yeah.
Lucas, are you here? Lucas, no.
Lucas is not here, sadly.
Oh, Lucas is on our committee. Lucas had to go. We're running late. Okay. Uh-oh, my sister. Are you here, Otsu? No.
Also, birthday, happy birthday, Otsu.
Yes, it was Otsu's birthday.
Happy birthday, Otsu.
There's a little nepotism there. Jackie Alexander. Are you here? All right. Yukiko. Yukiko, are you here? I can't see the list.
Yukiko left.
Yukiko left. Oh, remove all instances. She might be here multiple times. Everyone sticking with me here?
We're here with you.
Okay. Tom, you still here?
Yay, Tom is still here. Woo, Tom!
Yay, okay. Nice. Tom, we'll be in touch about your prize bundle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was right.
Donald, did you stay? Are you here?
Donald is here, just commented.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Okay, Donald.
I stayed for a reason.
Okay. Sumiko, are you here? Yes?
Sumiko's here.
Okay, great.
Woo!
I knew that first. So much.
Roland? No.
Roland's not here.
Okay. I don't know Roland. David?
Congratulations.
All right, we've got 3 winners so far. Sharon T. Sharon T.
I don't see a Sharon in the participants list.
All right.
My name is Hachinan. That's all right. You, yeah.
Akemi Takeda. Akemi's here?
Akemi's here.
Yay!
Hey, Akemi.
Yay.
Yay.
Kasumi Yamashita.
Here.
Here?
Yep.
Woohoo, okay. Oh,
Wow.
Carl. Okay.
Wow.
Wow.
Never know,
Howdy, Edda.
Edda.
Yeah, she's here.
Okay.
Yay.
All right. Caitlin, Hika? No.
Caitlin is not here.
Okay, so three more. Miwa, are you here?
Yeah, Miwa's here.
Yeah. Oh, great. Great. Yay. Lane, are you here?
Lane is not here.
Oh. Two more. Leslie.
Woo!
You here?
She's
Good.
here.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Last one. Last one.
Last win.
Super bundle.
Super bundle.
Catherine.
No, Catherine.
Oh, but thanks for registering.
One more.
Suzanne?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
here. Wow, thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. I think Stan's just going to say a quick closing and thank yous. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thanks to you for handling the raffle. That was a lot of fun. And thanks everybody for attending our very first virtual day of Remembrance. We really appreciate your participation. Thanks again to the panelists. That was a really great conversation. And thanks to Leslie Inaba, Wong and Julia Zuma for the really nice remembrances of people in the community. For all those that contributed items to the raffle bundle, thanks very much for doing that, especially the support and help from Susan McCormick, who really helped organize everything. If you'd like to donate to our DOR committee, see the PayPal link in the chat. I'll see if I could put that in there right now. And that'll take you to the PayPal link. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, as well as following Sudo for Solidarity on all three platforms. So again, thanks a lot for attending, and let's all continue to support our communities and other communities, and just strive for better justice and a better country. So thanks a lot, and hope to see you everybody again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
You have to. ありがとうございました。
Thank you.
Be well, everybody. Be well. Take care.
Hi, Mom.
Wait, I didn't know your mom was here.
Whew. Amazing. I
Go.
don't know if I should end it or if we should. Oh, hello.
Good job.
Woohoo. All right.
Bye, Becca.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for inviting me.
I hope you have a good day.